Tim Lake is the only son. His father James is a retired lecturer. His mother is Mary, and his sister is Kit Kat. Tim says he comes from a not-so-typical family setting. On New Year's Eve, his family organizes their usual party. During the countdown to the new year, his friend Polly expects him to kiss her, but he doesn't. The party ends and he goes to bed. The following day, his father wakes him up. He's clocking 21 that day. His father tells him that their family has a secret and may feel weird to be at first. His father tells him that their family has the power to go back in time. Tim doesn't believe this. He asks his father how he could do it, and his father tells him he has to enter a dark place like a cupboard and then clench his hands together. He should think of that place and the time he wants to get to, and he would get there. Tim gives it a trial immediately, enters into his cupboard, thinks about the New Year's Eve with Polly, then jumps back in time. He goes back to that scene and kisses Polly. He returns to his father and asks him what the power could be used for. His father, James, tells him that he used his ability to read all the possible books and advises Tim to use his power anyhow he feels like it. Tim suggests using the power to make money, but his father advises him otherwise, saying his grandfather's life was miserable because he used the power of money. Tim decides to use his power to find love. That summer, Charlotte, the cousin of Tim's sister's boyfriend, comes to their house for summer. Tim likes Charlotte and plans to use the summer to get closer to Charlotte. One day, Charlotte asks Tim to help her rub her back. He mistakenly pours so much of the cream. Trying to correct his mistake, he went back in time and did it well. Over the summer, he is unable to express his feelings to Charlotte. Eventually, it is Charlotte's last night at their house. He goes into Charlotte's room that night to express his feelings. Charlotte replies to him, it is too late and he should have expressed his feelings earlier. Hearing this, Tim goes back in time and comes back to declare his feelings earlier. Charlotte tells him to wait for her and asks her the question about her last night. The following day, Charlotte leaves their house. Tim says he has learned his first lesson, which is that no time travel can make a woman fall in love with you. Tim is also to leave his family the next day for London. He's going in search of a promised future in love. He bids his family goodbye. Getting to London, he is to stay with Henry, his father's friend, who is a writer. Knocking at Henry's door, Henry asks who he is and who his father is. Henry grants him entrance into the house and asks him to stay quiet. Henry returns to Tim and tells him he just got a great writing inspiration when Tim knocked. He takes Tim to his daughter's room. Tim resumes work, where he meets Rory, a colleague. Tim continues in London searching for love. For about 6 months he didn't find love, and he was lonely with Henry, who spends his time writing his new play. One night, Tim visits a Dans Le Noir restaurant where he flirts in the dark with Mary. Coming out of the restaurant, he collects Mary's number and walks back home happily. Union gets home. He meets Henry in a low position. Henry says the lead actor in his new play forgot all his lines, and the viewers had to stay about 30 minutes without any words for the actor. He says his play would go down in history as the worst play ever. Tim wants to change the fate of Henry's play, so he goes back in time before the show. He meets a man who he thinks is the lead actor and asks the man to reread his lines. As the play starts, it turns out the man he met was. He writes the lines on a board and shows the lead actor from afar. Henry's drama becomes a huge success. Unfortunately for Tim, the event of visiting the restaurant and taking Mary's number no longer occurred. He goes to the restaurant, but Mary isn't there again. He goes back home dejected. Henry shows Tim the newspapers that wrote about his drama in the news. Tim sees an exhibition of Kate Moss and remembers that Mary is a fan of Kate Moss. He goes to the exhibition and stays there every week. A week later, he meets his sister Kit Kat at the exhibition. While they both talk, Mary walks in. He approaches Mary, but Mary doesn't know him. Mary asks him to leave. Kit Kat advises him to go back to Mary. He comes again. This time, Mary is with her friend. Tim tells them he is lonely and needs to walk through the center with them. The girls accept him. During their lunch together, he asks Mary if she has a boyfriend, and Mary replies affirmatively. The boyfriend arrives. Tim asks for information about how they met and where they met, since Mary met the boy about a week ago. Tim travels back to the party Mary met her boyfriend. He meets with Mary before the guy arrives and gets closer to Mary, using the exact phrase Mary told him about Kate Moss. He asks Mary to follow him to a restaurant where they eat and play. Leaving the restaurant, Mary asks him to walk her to her car. After walking a long way, Mary tells him her vehicle is at home, so they walk to Mary's house and have sex. The sex is Tim's first sex. To enjoy it better, he goes back in time about twice again and has sex with her. They start dating and he packs his load to live with Mary. One day, Mary's parents visit. He mistakenly talks about oral sex and has to go back in time to change his words. That night, he asks Mary to follow him to the theater, but Mary refuses to follow him. She tells him to take another person. He takes Ross to the theater, where he coincidentally meets Charlotte again. He goes to her and she introduces him to Tina, who she calls her girlfriend. Tim misinterprets girlfriend to mean that Charlotte is gay. He realizes he is wrong, so he goes back in time to change his words. Coming back, Charlotte says that they are gay, and he goes back in time again to correct his remarks. Eventually, he can relate to Charlotte, and they go out on a date. During the date, Charlotte says she wishes she had spent that summer well. She says if she could go back in time, she would have told him yes. Charlotte asks him to see her off home. She invites him inside, but he refuses to her since he no longer is interested in her. He runs home immediately and proposes to marry Mary. Mary accepts his proposal and he takes Mary home. Getting home, Mary is welcomed by everyone in the family. During dinner, Tim announces that they will be getting married soon and also tells his family that Mary is pregnant with his child. The lovers plan their wedding, and the wedding holds on a scheduled date. James gives his speech during the wedding. After the wedding, James remembers he didn't tell anyone how much he loves Tim, so James travels back to declare his love to his son. A few months later, Mary gives birth to a beautiful baby girl, which they name Posy. After the birth of Posy, Tim says that life has become so memorable that there is even no need for time travel. During Posy's one-year birthday, the family gathers to commemorate the birthday. Kit Kat is late to the party. They hear a noise and assume it is Kit Kat, but it is Jimmy, Kit Kat's boyfriend. They find Kit Kat at the hospital. She had an accident. Tim asks Jimmy for the exact time the argument started so he can go back in time to correct the wrong. He goes back and brings Kit Kat to the party. At the party, Mary tells him Kit Kat has a lot of issues, and he seeks to help her change them. He goes to her and tells her about his time traveling. He takes her back in time to where she met Jimmy. She figures that Jimmy would have hooked up with anyone that day, so she kicked his ass and left. Getting back to the present time, Tim finds out that his baby girl is now a baby boy. He changes everything he had done earlier, and they visit Kit Kat at the hospital. He talks to her and makes her break up with her boyfriend. He also hooks Kit Kat with his friend Jim. As time goes on, the union of Mary and Tim is blessed with another baby boy. One day, Mary finds out that Posy had thrown her client's manuscript. While she is angry, they receive a call from Mary, Tim's mother, that James is sick. They visit James. James says he can't go into the past to change his sickness, as it would mean that everything that had happened earlier would no longer happen. He says he has one more vital secret to tell Tim. The first is for Tim to make his life memorable, just like every other human. Then the second is for him to live every day twice, so the second time he can be unique and happy compared to the first. He did as his father had advised. Eventually, James dies, and Tim goes back in time to spend time with his father. Mary tells him she wants a third child. Tim refuses because he knows giving birth to another child would mean he won't be able to travel past the birth time to see his father. Mary insists she wants another child, so he agrees. Before the new child is born, Tim goes back in time to meet his father for the last time and bid him goodbye. To make their last day memorable, they travel to Tim's childhood days. Mary eventually gives birth to a baby girl. Tim decides to live each day just once. He decides not to travel again and appreciates the time he spends with his family.